gonna do my interpretation of some cosmos. So I've got my paint pretty soggy, and I'm using my Quinacridone Rose. And I counted the flowers on a cosmos, and there are 8 petals that are essentially on the same level, although 1 or 2 they do kind of overlap like a windmill. So I'm just putting some dots of paint down, and there's 8 petals, so I want 8 dots. Then I'm going to clean out my brush and get most of the water out of it, and just sort of pull the paint out to the petals, and then add a little more water. Pull that paint out, and then I just want to add another color in there just so it's not homogeneous. Okay, and I'm going to turn it around, and I'm going to turn around my photo references as I go, and I just kind of want to not make all the petals the same. So just pulled the dot paint out, then I get some of the water off my brush. Maybe I'll connect, and I get a little yellow. I'll stick that in there. So maybe this one will be my long petal. So I've got my dot of paint. I'll make this one sort of longer. And then run it out. Okay. And this one, maybe I'll make narrower. And then we'll run it out. Let's put, well, it's still wet, just add a little yellow so it's not homogeneous color. It's more interesting to have diversity in our colors. Maybe I'll put some of those striations out and just sort of let those go. So now I'm on this side. So I got a wet, dampy brush. I'll pull that paint out. Put some color in there. A second color. That's not very strong. Okay, maybe I'll leave a gap on this between these 2 petals like there is there. Pull it out, clean my brush, weaken the pigment, pull it out some more. Maybe I'll do the same thing here, leave a gap between those 2 petals. Well, it's still wet. Add a second color, in this case yellow. Maybe add a little bit of stronger along the edge. Just let them swim around in the wet. Have some fun with it. Okay, then while it's still wet, I'm going to find a darker color, contrasting. So maybe I'll mix up a purple, or use a purple if you have a purple in your palette. I have 2 purples. So I'm just going to put some dark, strong pigment. Kind of let it float back into the wet. kind of sort of using that as inspiration, but not making it too perfect. Now I'm going to move on to another flower, and I can put it down there like it is in the photograph so you can see the process from the start. So I'm going to put 8 little dots of color. I do like it being off center, but maybe not quite so far down. So I'm going to start off with my dots of Quinacridone Rose. Pretty strong pigment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I don't want them all to be the same. And I'm going to leave the centers for later. Okay, and I want to make this flower different than that flower. So I'm not taping my paper down because I want to have freedom of movement. Okay, so I'm going to pull the paint out. Clean my brush, pull it out some more. Maybe add a little, let it dot it in there. Sort of define an edge. Let's add some of that yellow just so it's not lonesome colors. I got, full disclosure, I kind of got the idea for the dot method off a YouTube video that came up after I was watching one of mine, but I'm varying it a bit. So put some more paint. I don't think I have enough strong paint. So I'm just going to come up and do a kind of a calligraphy stroke. Wet. Get all the paint out of my brush. Trying really hard to just use the photo as a source rather than as a slavishly follow the photo. They're mostly pink flowers, but I do feel that I need a little second color in there. Could probably put blue in. Okay, so pull it out with a damp brush. So this little petal is kind of behind everybody else. Might need a little bit of paint in there. Okay, coming around here, maybe I'll put a gap. So pull the paint out, clean my brush, wipe off most of the water, and then pull it out some more. And this one I'll leave a little gap, make it go the other direction, kind of like it does in the photo. Clean it off. Forgot to put a little yellow in some of those other petals. Maybe pump up some of that. A little bit around the edge so you can see the end of the petal. Oh, I like that, making that one a little stronger. And then maybe we'll create a gap on this one. Pull it out, creating kind of a tonal wash of color. I've kind of got them facing right at the camera, both of them. Just put a little yellow in there. And then we'll get our strong contrasting color, contrasting in value. And while it's still wet, give some sense of that dark back in there. Just let it swim into the wet randomly. Okay, then let's get this one that's at a different angle. So I do like these being kind of connected. So we'll start with the dots again, but we'll only do a half. So this is with pretty strong paint. So you're going to just do a dot. Maybe we'll do 5. But they're at, we don't have any that's going all the way around. So start with this one. Pull that out. Add a little stronger. Maybe squiggle around the edges a little bit. Add some yellow, especially close to the center. Okay, let's pull this one out, but it won't be as long. We'll make it kind of short and fat. And this one the same. Make it kind of short and fat. Maybe pull it out and connect with the other flower so that the whole composition feels connected. Put in some yellow. Now we'll pull this one out and it'll be a long one. Maybe leave a gap and then connect again. And we'll pull that out a little further. Get some pink. Maybe right into the wet on the edge to help define. And then let's use our contrasting color again. Put it into the wet and let it swim around there. Okay, then we need some stems. So I'm going to create my stems with the purple and the yellow, so they're not too bright green. And I'm going to do a dot again, this time kind of a semicircular dot. Connect a little bit. And then I want to do a calligraphy stroke because these are fairly thin. So the stem always comes out of the center. We'll do the centers in a minute, but I want to think about this is kind of heavy, so the stem is kind of fallen. Because this is the stem for this one, and then we'll think of it coming out of the center, curving around behind there where we can't see it. I actually want to use just the yellow. Okay, so here goes my calligraphy stroke. I don't want it to be too straight. Maybe I'll put some yellow on the other side of that just to give it a little dimension. And then I'll take my murky color and sort of just touch the edge of the back side. And don't be afraid of hit and miss. lost and found edges are really more interesting than solid edges. So start with the yellow again. Let's put some of that purple on the back side of the stem. Just mix that up so it's not all the same value. Okay, should we try to do this little guy? So I'm gonna take some of the purpley color that I was using, and I'm just gonna do sort of a half moon shape. I'm gonna put some of that while I'm thinking about it. Okay, so instead of a dot, it's more of a big dot. And then I'm going to clean my brush. I'm just going to soften the edge so it's lighter on top. Okay, then I'm going to get my yellow. And I'm just going to pull out, and the purple, some of those little lines. Calligraphy strokes that we were practicing earlier. And then we'll carry that down into the stem. Okay, so we have to do something about these centers. I want to make sure they're really dry first, otherwise it will the yellow will get polluted. So let me give it just a little bit more minute, and meanwhile I want to pull out a rigger brush just so I can get a thin line and run it through my purpley yellow color that's sort of brownish, and I just want to do some of those stringy bits that make Cosmos so fun. They do tend to come off stems, so let's put some up above the flowers, even though they don't really look that way on the photograph. Just make a more interesting composition, just to connect our shapes. We'll have a fun little flower painting. Okay, so I'm gonna do a couple more of those. Maybe I'll put one right there, kind of like this one. I'm taking it, so I'm going to take the purpley color and I'm going to do a little half moon dot. So it's a big dot halfway. And then I'm going to get a little bit of yellow on it, and I'm just going to soften it up into that circle. And then we'll do those little bits that come around it. Give it a stem. And some swirly bits. with my bigger brush too, so they're not all super thin. And I just kind of like that. So let me dry off the centers, make sure they're super dry. I'll do that off camera. I'm just going to connect that there. And kind of lift off one of those things across the center. So just lift that a little bit to hint at one of those being in front, give it some dimension. Kind of a cute little painting. All right, let me stop the recording and dry it off. Okay, well, off camera I did dried off the centers to make sure they're nice and dry. Now I'm going to pull out the same yellow that I've been using, which is the new Gamboge in my palette. It might be Hansa Yellow Medium. And now I'm just going to do a series of little yellow calligraphy strokes there, which you can't really see as well. But I want to put the yellow down first. So that I have a sense of those yellow centers. Maybe I'll put some little dots around this one around the outside. And then lots of little dots in the middle. Okay, but you can't really see them, so I think I'll bring in some of the red. Well, it's still a little bit wet, and just dot a little bit of red around in there, just to give it some dimension. Just tiny dots. Maybe pull it down into sort of a comma shape. So a dot and then a drag to make it kind of a comma effect. And then I'm going to go back over that with the yellow again, because I want them to read as yellow. Then I'm going to dry it again and put just a hint of some really darks, purples. Contrast, but I don't want the contrast to cover up the yellow, so I'm going to dry this again. Okay, and then get some of the purple. I also cleaned off my mixing area off camera, so this was my purple color. It's kind of a Rose of Ultramarine, so it's got a lot of red in it and some ultramarine blue. Okay, so on here I'm going to just pump up some of those darks and just couple little dots just to give it some dimension. I don't want to cover up my yellow, but I need to couple of little dots. And that's why I wanted to make sure it was dry first. Just here I just want to do it on the outside, but I don't want to belabor it because I want to make sure that it's fresh. The more I touch a painting, the less fresh it is. And then I need an edge along this so the stems don't look so apparent. So I might just do a little calligraphy around the edge of some of these petals. Not all of them. Just a little where they meet the stem. A little bit. To put those stems behind. And I could take my bigger brush and do that blend out that we did with the dots. In some places. Make sure your brush is clean. Sometimes I like the line, sometimes I don't. So that's a little cosmos painting. I think is really cute. I do want to lift off some of this stem work here, just kind of soften and knock it back a bit. I think it's too harsh. Some places. Probably a mistake to do that. Just pick it up a little bit of that color. So as you can see, I didn't really do green stems. So I don't find stems to be super green. Okay. And then I want to clean up that shape a bit back there. Kind of find the edge of that petal by putting that little, whatever that's called, the pod. Okay, and then I want to sign it. So maybe I'll use the pink that's in the flowers. I usually like to use a color that's in the composition. And sort of balance out the composition. And I almost always use my liner brush for my signature just to keep it subtle. Alright, so that's one of our flower paintings. So I'm going to go back to this Cosmos one just a little bit. I kind of really liked it, this hinted at background on the sunflower, so I want to do a similar thing here. I'm just going to wet this a little bit first, kind of in a diagonal. I'm going over the stems and the little things, and I want to get a color that kind of complements. I do like it to bleed a little bit, so I'm not bothered by that. So just kind of wet that area in a diagonal. And I think I want to use the yellow, and if it gets slightly greenish, that'll be good, because it's the opposite of the pinky color. So just to create a hint of a background instead of a stark white background. Put a little bit of the blue in there. Just because it contrasts nicely with the red. To have a green back in there. Go ahead and call that out, that petal out. Careful, don't overdo. Just want a hint of color back in there. Really light, very tea strength. Wet it first, and then as it comes off the edge, get closer to yellow. not covering up all the white, just to help give it a setting. Yeah, kind of nice. The last thing I want to do is sort of soften this holding thing. Just find our eye goes to where there's hard edges, and I don't necessarily want you to go there. So I'm just going to soften that a bit. Put water in after it was completely dry and just sort of blend out the edges a little bit. Okay, we are done.